Bruce Joshua Saunders. Joshua is an unusual name. I found growing up at school, because when you go to school and you beginning of the year, they say, tell us your name. You stand up in front of everyone, and I always got embarrassed when I said Bruce was all right, but Joshua, that sounded odd, and Saunders. So anyway, we got over that. But Joshua is my great grandfather, so I should be proud to have his name. Anyway, well, I guess life. Well, I got a twin brother, and our very early years were in Port Pirie in South Australia, and it was my dad was a. You want all this? Yeah, and my dad was a teacher at one teacher school. So there's about 30 kids, and he taught the whole school. And we were living out of Port Pirie in the salt bush, very dry. And my brother and I used to enjoy life by rolling out. We didn't have many toys as we grew up, and we used to sit on the floor and roll rolls of tins of jam or fruit up and down to each other. This was great fun for us. It was you build blocks with tins of fruit and different things. So it was a very nice life. And then from there, we went to when we were about 9, 10. We were there in this Pirie Blocks area, about 6 miles from the main town of Port Pirie. And then we went to the Barossa Valley, which is where there's a great growing area. And my dad went to teach there in a bigger school, and he was our class teacher for a while in that Nurioppa school. And my mother also, because growing family, and teachers were short. She was not a trained teacher, but she went and got accepted as being an untrained teacher, and she taught at another school nearby. And that was a great time. We grew up in our teenage years. I got myself a first job was delivering milk in this town of Nurioppa, where we had in the mornings we'd go and with another guy and I, we'd have to go and get the horse out of the paddock, bring him in to put him into the cart, and we'd have drums of cans of milk, and we'd drive the horse around town and run in with buckets. We'd carry a full 2 or 3 gallon bucket, and we'd run to the front doors of people's houses, and they'd have a note, we want 1 pint, 2 pint, and there'd be money there, and we'd take the money and give them the milk and then go back. And one of the embarrassing days was, because normally the horses are used to doing the same trip each day, and as soon as they would stop at a certain space, because you could bring them to a halt, but then as soon as they heard the drums, felt them being put on the cart, they would start moving off. And this day I put the drum on, but I hadn't got myself on, and the horse started. I fell over in the middle of the main street of this country town, with holding on to the can of drum of milk, and it went all over me and the town. So that was very embarrassing for a young fella.
Oh,
anyway,
man.
it was. We used to do grape picking in the Barossa Valley. Is very great, well known for its wineries and grapes, and that was our. And my father was a teacher, so he had school holidays, and the grape season was on for picking during the November-December period, and so we'd all go out grape picking. It was there that my parents first heard of the Baha'i faith, and because we kept asking our parents, Tony and I, what happened to us when we died, and they couldn't really answer. And we were Methodist, but we had a Seventh-day Adventist minister come, and he shared the belief of the Seventh-day Adventist was that if you became a Seventh-day Adventist, you'd be born again, and when you died, you'd go to heaven. And of course, my parents said, well, what about all these other religions in the world? Because being school teachers, they were aware of that, and they said, well, Christ is the only way, and Seventh-day Adventist, and that put us on a journey to look for something else. And that's where we learnt of the Baha'i faith first, when friends who came to a neighbour of ours in Europe, and from there my father started to get beginning of illness known as Parkinson's, so we had to move to Adelaide, and we settled there in Adelaide in Woodville, and he then became unable to work, so my mother was to work, and then this impacted on our lives, because for each, well, it sort of settled me in a career, I suppose, because my mother would give Tony, my twin brother, myself and my older brother jobs. My older brother, he had to do the washing on Saturday. I got home, I would have to prepare the vegetables and that ready for dinner, and Tony did the gardening. So we all had our jobs, and that from there that began my career in catering, and I ended up at the Royal Adelaide Hospital. We cooked in a kitchen that provided 1,000 meals for patients and 1,000 meals for staff every day, 3 times a day. And it was basic, but it was good. And then life went on, and we then ended up, I went over to Melbourne to do a chef's course in the William English Trade School. And that was a 6-month full-time course. I did the course. The school was started up by a food company called William English Trade School, and it was following a lot of chefs came out for the Olympics in Melbourne in 1954 or 56, and then this company, there was a lot of chefs who came out from the different countries, and there was a Frenchman and a Swiss person and a few others, and they started this school where you could do a chef's course for 6 months full time, and you could do food waiting and cake decorating and so forth. So I did that, and then I got a job in a Salvation Army men's hostel. They said, look, I wasn't really wanting to be in the kitchen all the time. I was really looking like this could be a management role in the future. Anyway, they said, well, look, when we finished the chef's course, they found a job for you, and they said, look, you can, we've got this Salvation Army men's hostel. They want somebody to do a cook and run the kitchen, and you'd be running the kitchen, doing the ordering menus. It'd be basic, but it's managing staff and running it. So I took it on, and that was a good basic groundwork in management and handling a few staff. And I then was able to get a job with a company called Nationwide Food Service, who just come into Australia from America, and they provided catering services for factories, schools and hospitals, and they would take over the catering contract and then provide staff to do and run the kitchens and so forth, and serve the staff in office blocks and things like that. And so I got a job there for a while, and I ended up in a short term where I became a regional manager and operated 6 of these sort of operations.
Well, yeah, it's quite historic really, because next year on the 1st of March 2024 will be 70 years since I arrived in the Solomon Islands, which is quite remarkable really, to have been there 70 years and still be there. Those people don't stay that long, especially expatriates. So I suppose looking back to the day we arrived, I was 7 years old, 7.5, and it was I don't remember too much about it. I remember we went in by a rowboat, and were left on the shore. There was no wharf, and my mother, who was a New Yorker and had lived in New Zealand, but New Zealand was quite a lot more sophisticated, she said, "Oh my, what do we do now, Alvin? How do we get to the hotel?" And as if on cue, a vehicle pulled up, and it turned out he was a priest in the Anglican Church, and he said, "Do you guys need a lift?" And we said, yes, we did. And he took us to the 9-room hotel called the Woodford Hotel, after the first District Commissioner, Charles Woodford, who'd been there many years before. And I was, as I said, I was 7 years old, and I looked out the window soon after we arrived, and I saw the most amazing sight. My mother said I was a very active child, and I'm sure I was, because I'm a very active adult. She said I stood there for a full 30 minutes looking at the scene of this woman, the Solomon Island woman, with enormous bushy hair. She was smoking a pipe. She had rings in her ears and her nose. She had no top. She was, I'd say, 6 months pregnant, and she had a skirt hanging below her belly. She had a little baby strapped on her back. Did I say she was smoking a pipe? I think I did. She had a little bilum bag around her neck, and she was chopping wood. And the sight of it, I think, was just beyond anything in my entire imagination. As my mother said, I never moved for 30 minutes as I looked at this woman. And that was my introduction to the Solomon Islands. I think it was the first or second day I was there, and it's been an interesting ride ever since. It was to do with the Baha'i faith. They had gone to India for the 1953 World Congress. There was 4 of them around the world, and the idea was to encourage people to go out to virgin Pacific or virgin countries and islands and territories around the world. And so it was his job to place people in where they had pledged to go. And there was a pile of territories and islands and countries around the world that they had come from. The Guardian was still alive, and he had said these are virgin areas. Well, while they were there, I was left in New Zealand at a boarding school, but while they were there in India, news came through that Lillian Alahi, who had planned to go to the Solomons and open the Solomons, she wasn't Alahi then, it was before she was married, but she had given an interview to the Sydney Morning Herald. Her name was Lillian Wiss, excuse me, and it had said she was going to the Solomons and that she was a Baha'i. It came out in the interview. Anyway, when the British government saw this article, they cancelled her visa. She was going as a secretary. So that news came across, and my father, without even consulting my mother, which often happened, he said, well, we'll go to the Solomon Islands and take her place. I was there during the war. So just like that, and my mother was a bit aghast. She said, we don't know anything about the place. He said, it didn't matter. It was open for pioneering, so we'd go. And so that's how we ended up going there. We had a lot of trouble getting a visa for the same reason that Lillian had trouble. It was a British protectorate, and they were very, very being protected of who came there. And so Alvin, being an American, being Jewish, and being a Baha'i, had 3 counts against him before he even started. In the end, he talked them through, and they gave us a visa. So we had this. So we finally got on this old rust bucket called the Malaita ship, and it took us 3 weeks to get to the Solomons through hail and hearty weather. It was very rough in parts. And we got to the Solomons, as I said, on the 1st of March 1954. And so that was the reason we went there. It was basically to teach the Baha'i faith, to establish the Baha'i faith. But the Guardian had said to my parents, be very careful in your first few years, just establish yourself, make yourself known, get a job or a business, and then gradually teach the faith. Do not upset the authorities and whatever. So that was what happened. And we went there, and it was very difficult. it was very, very difficult. We had to establish ourselves. We had no work. We had nowhere to live. With this hotel, we couldn't stay there. We finally found an old officers' armies mess for rent in one of the plantations just a few miles out of the centre of town. And we rented that for a while. Had no electricity, had no water. I fell through the floor in the first week. It was full of white ants. It was quite a fall too, but I was okay. It was just another adventure. We gradually got ourselves established. Dad started a taxi service and a this and a that, and he took a job that they needed someone to help in the government trade scheme, which was like the government store, and he took a job doing that for a while. In the meantime, every day he was interrogated by the police as to what he was doing there, and it was challenging. But it was interesting. The police commissioner had been in Palestine before. He was British, of course, and he'd been in Palestine, which was a British territory, before independence, and he knew of the faith. He'd known of Abdu'l Baha, who was very much loved and revered in Israel. It was the Holy Land at the time, and so gradually he was more sympathetic to why we were there, and we wanted to establish business. Dad was a businessman, and we were eventually allowed to stay. That took about 3 to 4 months of fairly intense interviews and interrogation. In the meantime, I was sent to the small little school, which only was for expatriate children. There was virtually very few schools for the Solomon Island children, just mostly mission schools, and of course they didn't want to send me there. Being a Baha'i, they probably wouldn't accept me. So I went to there was a little Red Cross school right in the centre of town, and it was for the expatriate children, and the British, being the way they were in those days, very class conscious, they were all told not to have anything to do with me, not to speak to me. So I was there for the first 6-8 months, and not one child spoke to me at school, and so that was challenging. But I thought, okay, well, if that's the way it is, so I learnt Pidgin very quickly and made a lot of friends with the local kids. And about a year later, the St John's School, which was a Catholic school, opened its doors to some sort of English-speaking students, and my mother enrolled me there. There were American nuns, they were very nice, and I was there with a lot of the sort of up-and-coming Solomon Islanders, the Wickhams, the Wheatleys, and other families that were often mixed-race families that, you know, were English speakers, and we then were the first pupils at the St John's School. And that's where I went to until I eventually ended up going to Australia to continue my higher education. So that was my early life there. I had made lots of friends, and in the end the British came round. I think they saw that we were there to help the community, and I did have a few British friends, but it was mostly my local friends, and I'd make all my had our time there. And then we had moved then, of course, to the Baha'i, what is now the Baha'i Centre, which was just, and we had somewhere, you know, and it was an interesting place. It was we were able to get it through a whole series of events. We were able to get a small section of 3 acres out of from the people who had owned it. They had a whole plantation, but they had defaulted on their payment. So the government took it back and then offered us 3 acres of the land. Now that land now is the Baha'i Centre, the National Baha'i Centre, and it's the most beautiful, beautiful area. my mother started to plant there and make it a garden, but I've continued it to make it what it is today. And it's really now almost in the centre of the city, because the city's expanded. And it's a very beautiful place, and it's just so special that we have this large block of land and amongst all the city now, and the Baha'i centres there, and all the Baha'is have a wonderful, it's the national office, but it's also the local office, and there's a commercial sector. We had developed 6 rental houses, which we then sold to the National Assembly, so it's an income for them. Yeah, and so it's really the hub now of the Baha'i faith in the Solomon Islands. Grandma planted about 50 mango trees, and she planted a cashew nut tree, and she planted, there's a beautiful, we call Haifa lemon tree, that was planted by Charlie Boyle, who had come back from Hill Pilgrimage with some seeds and planted them, and that's just the amount of beautiful orange lemons we get from that fruit every time. And there's star fruit trees, and there's different types of fruit trees that are all around, that when I pick them up, I think of Grandma. She had a green thumb.
There was a Baha'i summer school taking place, and in the year '66, and I would do the catering for this summer school. A lot of people from different parts of Australia would come and have weeks get together at Yerrambul, which is in the countryside out of Sydney, and we'd have different talks, and different Baha'is from different places would come and share. And on Keithie had come down to go to this, and of course I had met her father. He used to come down from Honiara to Sydney. I was living with a Jewish couple who had become Baha'is, and Mr. Blum was very good friends with them, and he would always see them, and Mr. Blum, being the man that he was here on business, looking around. He knew because my work life was, I had a day shift of 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. one day, the next day 6 o'clock to midday. So on the afternoons, he said to me, he'd like me to run him around, because he had to buy things for the business in Honiara. So I did that, and he thought I was pretty good, and he told his daughter that he found a nice young man. But of course that was the last thing that the daughter was going to believe. Anyway, so that was that, and then she came down to the summer school, and then I was taking a girlfriend of mine to the summer school, and she wanted to lift up, so she came up with me, and then we became got to know each other very well at the summer school, not with the girlfriend, but with Keithie. And then we connected at the school, and decided we'd like to get married. It was quick, Spartan. And I said to Keithie, look, when we go back, I'll take the girl. She sat in the front of the car with me, because so I'm going to dump her when I get back. And she sat in the back. That wasn't the best thing to do, but anyway, we did it. So we went back, dropped her off, and that's it. And then from there on in, from there we got married, and went on our honeymoon. We came back, and there was a teaching conference at the Baha'i Centre, so we went there, and at this one, it was the beginning of one of the plans of teaching of the faith, the 9-year plan in 1966. And I was just recently telling the Baha'i community in Honiara this story of how we left Sydney Harbour at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 21st of April before sunset, which meant we were on our way to fulfil the goal in the Cook Islands, and we had to go to New Zealand, because no one in Australia knew anything about the Cook Islands. We went to New Zealand, stayed with a family friend of Keithie's mum and dad, a very old Baha'i friend, and then we had a month there. We went and looked for jobs, etc., with people who had connections in the Cook Islands, and nothing really came. But we had to we got on. There was a 7-day sea trip, and the ship left Auckland Harbour. It was a cargo cum passenger ship of about 20 passengers, and we got our luggage on there, not that we had much, and then we went to the Cook Islands. And on the way to the Cook Islands, we met some of the people who had been on holidays. He was a teacher and his wife. They'd coming back from holidays in New Zealand, and they worked in Cook Islands, and they said, well, you know, what are you doing here, where are you going? And because it was unusual that people would be coming just with nothing, so we said we're going there to settle and so on. And so they sort of gave us an appearance, you know, a bit of idea of what they're there. Then we got there, and there was no port that you could come into. You anchored beyond the reef, and you got on little barges were towed out by a tugboat, and you were put in these boats and towed into the shore. And as I was saying to the friends of the Honiara recently, I said, that was the first time as I came ashore that I realised, heavens above, there's all this wonderful crowd there, but there's not one white face I can see. They're all brown. And that was the first time I'd ever felt, oh, we're odd people. We're not that colour. But anyway, they were happy, smiling, and a great place, and we were very much at home. So we had, we settled in there, eventually found a job, and the job was excellent. We stayed with the Baha'i friends that I knew who lived in the village on the other side of the Rarotonga was only 20 miles round, and they lived down in an area where there was a volcanic rocks and so forth. It was very nice near the water's edge, and we lived in their tool shed, as it were. We had a double mattress, and we laid that on the floor, and that was home. And we went looking around, and in the end they had a guest house at the in Avarua, the city town, which accommodated government workers coming from New Zealand to work for the Cook Island government and help out. So they, on the trip on the boat, the couple that were running it had got into some trouble with the government, and they'd been sacked. And the people on the boat that we'd met said, look, because they had found out, well, I was a chef and Keithie was a nurse, they said, well, look, there's a job for you. These people have been sacked. And so we applied for the job, and after a month or so they said, look, we're going to give you a trial period for 6 months, and if it's okay you can stay on. So we got a job on the hotel, and it gave us accommodation, and it was the best thing we could do. We're in the city centre of the village life, or the main town of Rarotonga, Avarua, and we ran the hotel, and we had the best of everything, because we had accommodation, we had free place to live, and it was the centre of town. All the government offices were nearby, and every day we provided morning and afternoon tea for all the government officers, and they'd come and have it. So we became known, and we started up different things there, and we were there for 2 years. And Natasha, our first daughter, was born in August, and a month, and Mr. Blum and Keithie's mum and dad had come to visit us the year before, and they didn't put the pressure on me, but they obviously said to Keithie, we're looking for a grandchild, and she was born, and we sent a picture off, and then a month later we got word that her father had passed away suddenly, and we had to leave.
Because we didn't expect him to die as quickly as he did. He literally dropped dead. He was 56 years old. Natasha was only a month old. Natasha was born on the 21st of August, and he died on the 23rd of September. And so he never saw her. He did have a photo of her, which he kept producing when anybody asked. When they didn't ask, he produced it. So we had no intention of returning to the Solomons. We were very happy in the Cooks, and we had a wonderful life, and we had a great future mapped out for us. We were planning to go to the East-West Centre to do a degree in tourism, and tourism was just getting going in the Cooks at that time. They were just building their airfield. They didn't have an airfield. Everything was by boat. And Bruce was on the Tourist Council, and I was running we were in the hotel and running the only government hotel. There was more hotels planned. And it was such a lovely place. We could see a great future, and we were very happy there. But Dad died, and we had no alternative but to go back, because sadly, I was the only child of the Alvin and Gertrude. And we knew that if we didn't go, and my mother wasn't able to handle the business as the way Alvin used to, that we, and it was a sacrifice for us. I was very sad and unhappy to leave the Cooks, and so was Bruce. And for Bruce, it was probably even, I knew, the Solomons was a difficult place. The Cooks was such an easy place to live. And the Solomons was a difficult place. It's still such a difficult place to live. It's just such a complex country. But I love it, and I love the people, so, 70 years is a long time. But it was more difficult for Bruce, because he had to take over the business, and it was in a bad state because he died. We just built the hotel, we owed a lot of money, and he had to figure his way out through this. And Natasha was just a baby, and so I didn't work in the business. I was sort of a new mum, and it was very difficult for him. I think a lesser man would have walked away, but he endured and tried to bring the business into business lines. It was very much run the way Alvin wanted it to. He didn't have anything, how much the staff were paid. It was just what he told the girl to pay her every week, and it was very sort of on his own whim and will and determination that the business was in the condition that had got to the stage it was. There was a general business and an ice cream and a lolly soft drink factory, and then of course the hotel was built afterwards, and he died soon after it was built. So and they'd extended it, and that's where they put the cafe in. And it was called Blum's Hotel in those days, and now called King Solomon. Yeah. So he had a heart attack and went to the hospital, and they were going to they were treating him, but they wanted him to stay longer, but he refused because he said he had too much to do. So he discharged himself, went out and kept on with his work, and then a few days later he had another attack, and they went down to the hospital. They couldn't revive him, and they couldn't open the gas bottle, the oxygen bottle, and he died.
Well, the legacy is already there. I think it's that we worked for the community. We worked for the Baha'i community. We did things. We started one of the things we did was a award called the Blum's Award for honouring Mr. and Mrs. Blum. But it was given to people who'd done good work, some islanders who'd done good work in their community that helped. So that was, and that went down. It was the first time. It was acknowledging them, encouraging Solomon Islanders to do things. We were on the Chamber of Commerce. We started tourism like on OB in 1970 from 1990, and we went to the palace, and Prince Charles gave us the OB, and then 9 years later I got awarded the knighthood, and it went back again, and then that time the Queen dabbed us on the shoulder, and it was, so, and the Solomons has had its own challenges, but it's been wonderful. Our kids have had a wonderful upbringing and multiculture, and we, by going to the Solomons, instead of having 2 children, we ended up with Rizwan, who's very much part of our family and continues to be with grandchildren. So as a result of that, our first great-grandchildren are from the line of Rizwan, who had his daughter, and who then got married and now have given us 2 great-grandchildren. we had a wonderful celebration a year or so ago with my twin brother and I for our 80th birthday, which was held here in Brisbane with all the family and his family, and we had a wonderful time. And so that's 80 years of life that I've nothing but happiness about. Yeah, that's another thing, because you know we had a coup in the Solomon Islands in 2000 where there was an upheaval and within the islands. People were sort of rioted, and the military had to come in from Australia to bring back law and order. And at that time I thought, well, what could we do to help bring the sense of oneness or of national feeling back to the into the community, which it was lacking. And I thought, well, and the Solomon Islanders, you know, World War II was a big thing because the Pacific War started on the battle with the Americans landing on Guadalcanal in 1942, 7th August 42, and that was the beginning of the pushback for the Japanese who were coming down and were trying to get into New Guinea and eventually wanted Australia. So that was a pushback, and the Australian government had set up a system of coast watchers who would live up in the bush with Solomon, well, in PNG and Solomons, and with radio would pass on information about the advance of the enemy and the Japanese, and they did wonderful things, and the coast watchers really wouldn't have survived. The Australians who were the coast watchers wouldn't have survived without the Solomon Scouts, who carried the things, their equipment, which was very heavy, and looked after them and took them up into safe places, and then enabled them to report back to the Australians. And so I thought, well, no one had honoured them, so I thought, well, let's do something, then this might bring pride to the Solomons. So we started the Solomon Scouts at Coast Watchers Trust Board, and we built stands on Coronation Street near the wharf, a monument that depicts the Australian Coast Watcher surrounded by 3 Solomon Islanders, one of them manning the radio, one of them pointing out, and another one holding a gun as indicative of that teamwork and security and working together. And so that was dedicated in 2011, first time it was unveiled, and it was created, the idea of the monument itself was from a very famous Solomon Island artisan, Frank Haiku, and he created this figurine of the European standing there with his binoculars, and then these 3 Solomon Islands around him with a radio, etc. And since then it's just gone from strength to strength, and now we have stories now that are being, and this is why I'm sure I got the community service, but this is a big thing why we might have got the knighthood, because this was honouring the history and these people in what they saw, and now there's studies being done, and there's now going to become part of the, just recently, after 5 years of effort, we've got the University of Solomon Island National University has embraced the studies of the history of the Solomon Scouts, and it's going to be part of the curriculum, so which is what we wanted to be developed.
I was still living a lot in Brisbane. Grandma got sick and she died in 1993, and it was I decided then to go spend more time back in Honiara, and our 3 daughters were all at university then, and had sort of established themselves as, you know, they were more adults, and so I spent more time in Honiara, and I suppose it was during that time the American government approached me. I was always registered as an American, to ask me if I'd be a warden, and a warden was a sort of like an honorary consul, and they said it didn't involve very much. It just, you just looked after any Americans that might have some issues, that, they got into trouble, or you need to visit them in prison, or they got sick and you advised the embassy. In Port Moresby it was, the embassy. So I said, oh, that's easy. So I did that for 2 years, and then the political situation in the Solomons was deteriorating. We were moving up into eventually what became known as the coup, or the ethnic tension. And the government kept asking me to do more and more things for them, like find out what is happening here, find out what's happening there, do this. It was quite sort of more more deep and meaningful reports they were wanting, and I said I had no authority to do any of that. They said, well, we're going to make you a consular agent. That's how I got involved with the diplomatic world. And so I went to Washington, got trained, came back, and then had all kinds of, the coup developed in a full force. Living through all that time was very interesting as a consular agent, what we could, and, luckily I had the diplomatic status by then, and I was able to go through roadblocks and all sorts. So I continued to do that, but at the same time, the government, I had no particular interest, no particular motivation, but the government were chopping down all the trees. One of the beautiful things about Honiara, as I grew up with, it was the street was lined with poinciana, or Christmas trees, flame trees we call them, the trees that have these beautiful red blooms at Christmas. Anyway, they were widening the road, so the government cut them all down, which had to be done. So I went to the council, this was about 1997, 98, and said, what plans do they have to put the trees back? And they said, oh, we've got no plans. I said, but you have to have trees in a city. It's like the lungs of a city. No, we've got no plans to put anything back. And I said, but you have to. And I kept pestering them. And they said, well, look, if you're so interested in it, you do it. That sort of gave me pause, and I thought, well, how do I do it? I haven't a clue. I happened to mention this conversation to the Deputy New Zealand High Commissioner, who was a keen gardener, and she said to me, well, Keithie, I've actually got some mission money that I could give you to start. Why don't you do it? And there's a fellow here, the husband of one of the volunteers, I think she was, or one of the officers, I'm not sure what her status was, but her husband was a landscaper, and he might be able to help you get started. So I thought about it for a while. I went back to the council and I said, well, what a council should have is a Parks and Gardens department. Every council in the world has a Parks and Gardens division where they manage the environmental side of the city. So I'm willing to start that for you. I've got this money from New Zealand and I've got this advisor, but you must, I'll work with you and you can develop this Parks and Gardens division. I'll start it for you. We'll start a nursery, we'll get it going. Yes. They'll just want to get me off their back. Yes, Keithie. Yes, anything, Keithie, they said. So that's what happened. So I started it with the best of intentions that we were going to morph into a Parks and Gardens, and I would then step out. But that never happened. The City Council never budgeted for to have a Parks and Gardens in, and each year I'd do more. I'd present a budget to them. I said, this is what we need, and oh no, we can't afford that. And so I just kept going, and donors kept giving me money because they saw what I was doing and they were very happy to support me. I mean, it was the environment, and it was using. I was starting to employ quite a lot of people, and they were ex-combatants, some of them. We were giving them training in gardening. We had brought up some volunteer trainers. So it was starting to become quite a big organisation. We became an NGO, and we exist again, called Solo Enviro Beautification. We've planted a lot of trees, flame trees, replanted them back. We've beautified Commonwealth Street. We've done the US monument, which memorial monument, which I looked after anyway, and Bruce and I looked after. We landscaped and gardened all that till it's quite beautiful. We do the airport. We do some major jobs. We have enough money to sustain ourselves as an organisation now.
I think that we want you, our grandchildren, to know the history. We feel that the Baha'i community is deserving to know of this history. I mean, these people who went out in the early days of the faith, the first ones, like the Blums, who went out, they were given a special title, Knight of Baha'u'llah, by the guardian of the Baha'i faith. There was I don't know, about 200 of them who went out to all parts of the world in 54 to spread the Baha'i faith. So we're a legacy of that, and we've continued on in that. And we played a part in the development of the Solomons from colonialism to what it is today. And your mum, your grandma, Keithie, has played a great part in her service, continuing that legacy of her parents and being the US consul agent for 22 years. I mean, that's a legacy of her own too. We said that the future of the Solomons is very great. So it had a future. Sometimes it didn't seem it would be that way when you went through the coup and different things, but I had that. There is a long-term success for mankind as well as the Solomons.
When you find your passion, and I suppose I did with the beautification, to pursue it, even under difficult circumstances, if it's a good idea, if it's worth pursuing, there's times when you've got to cut your losses. Establish your goal and go for it as much as you can, and if sometimes it doesn't work out as you expect, but something else opens up. So just keep at it. If it's a good idea and if it's meant to be, it will happen, and forces beyond you make that happen, I've found in life. To live your life to the fullest, don't let it slip by. I think it's been very challenging living there, but it's given us the best opportunities to develop ourselves, so you've got to look at it in a positive light. I doubt if we'd lived in Australia we would have been able to make the difference that we've been able to make in the Solomons. We've both of us got a lot of awards. I also have the OBE that's Order of the British Government, and I have a slew of Solomon awards. Dad, of course, has been knighted by the Queen for his efforts in preserving the history of the Solomons, what he's done in his charities. So I think we've been able to make much more of a difference than if we'd lived anywhere else. And so I've turned the challenges and the disadvantages into opportunities, I suppose that's what you could say. And by doing that, I suppose it's developed us as people. It's, oh God, my God, I'm a broken-winged bird, and my flight is very slow. Assist me so I may fly towards the apex of prosperity and salvation. Wing my way with the utmost joy and happiness throughout this illimitable space. Raise my melody in the supreme name in all the regions. Exhilarate his ear with thy call and brighten his eyes by beholding the signs of guidance. O Lord, I am single, alone and lowly. For me there is no support save thee, no helper except thee, no sustainer beside thee. Confirm me in thy service, assist me with the cohorts of thy angels, make me victorious in the promotion of thy word, and suffer me to speak out thy wisdom amongst thy creatures. Verily thou art the custodian of the poor, and the defender of the little ones, and verily thou art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise.
The one that, and I think everyone who's been out will say this one, that is the remover of difficulties, and it's a prayer that if said with wholeheartedness will bring assistance. Is there any remover of difficulties save God? Say, praise be God, he is God, all are his servants, and all abide by his bidding. And one other prayer that I often like to say is, unite the hearts of thy servants, reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. help them in their endeavour, and grant them strength to serve thee, and leave them not to themselves. Thou art their helper and their